And Mac is going to moderate our panel today and make some introductions of our speakers.
Thank you. I'm going to be brief because for our Sound of Silence presentation, we had a sound problem, so we're running a little bit behind. You do have a brochure here and program, and our distinguished panelists, their bios are there, and so I won't run through them, and hope you read them as well. We're fortunate to have Tiffany English from Ware Malcolm, Michael Dagosti from Snow Sound, and Andy Botner from SoftDB, or Speech Privacy Systems, that are going to talk about the sound of silence. Great oxymoron, isn't it? If y'all can take your seats up here, we're going to start off with Tiffany.
Only the one's working. Only the one is working.
There's only one working. Testing this acoustics.
Let me move this out of here. Do you want to hold it, or do you want to put it on here? Yeah. Maybe we'll. Alright, so I'm going to have to hold it. There's your pointer. Get that out of the way.
Now I got to deal with both of these. Okay, we'll try. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I want to thank IFMA for inviting this panel, because I'm sure many of you know that acoustics may not have always been the most riveting topic until as of late. And I wanted to just start out, before I get into the full presentation, to talk a little bit about why acoustics is so important. And a lot of it has to do with basically where office design is currently. So I'll talk a little bit about the challenges. I'm going to talk more about the warm and fuzzies, and Mike and Andy are going to talk a little bit more about the technical side of it. So I'm going to talk more about the design side of it. So acoustics, which I'm sure most of you get complaints about, besides temperature control, which is everybody's biggest complaint, have a lot to do with what I'm sure you all have heard of, which is the creative office design. That seems to be the big trend in office right now. I want to talk a little bit about that, because I don't think that creative office design, I think it's used too widely and too broadly, and I think that people just assume creative office design is a one-size-fits-all. We're all going to ride around in our scooters, in our open office space, on our concrete floors, and our open ceiling environments. So I don't think that that is, except for Joy at Cubic. Your space is amazing, especially because we did it. But I think that there's really a hybrid there. And I think that I'll talk a little bit about those issues, but I think it's because we are not a one-size-fit-all type of environment. I mean, companies are not that way. So there's really not one approach. And so when we do look at the variation of office design, having open office with private office, conferencing, meeting, privacy areas, that's where acoustics becomes really important. So, and it's more so important because we also have a multi-generational work environment. So multi-generational work environments mean that, a lot of us, I'm a Gen Xer, there's baby boomers probably too in the audience, and then there's the millennials. We all have different ways that we work, we can focus in the way that we like to get work done. So when you have a multi-generational work environment, you can't do a one-size-fits-all. You're still going to probably have to have some private offices. You're going to have some open office space. But then in that case, you've got to be able to find ways to make the acoustics work for everyone. So I think there's one other thing I just want to mention when it comes to creative office design or office design in general, is that I know we plan a lot for millennials nowadays. We talk about them all the time, and that we're all trying to attract them and retain them in our office environments, and we want to design for them. No offense, Mike. But I think what you have to remember is 3 to 5 years from now, we're going to have a whole new group of staff and employees and people coming into the office environment. They're called the Centennials. And they're all the ones that are going to be graduating from high school, getting out of college, and the whole office environment is going to change again. So don't get too stuck into the way things are. And Joy will talk about your office space at that point. So, but I think you just need to know that there's always that evolution in office space that will always change and grow with the different generational groups that are going to be in the office space. That's a whole nother separate presentation. So I'll jump now into the acoustics. So challenges with acoustics. Obviously, privacy is one of the biggest challenges with acoustics is people want privacy. So even if you do want to be in an open office environment and you want to have collaborative work and you want to be able to talk to the person that you're working with, your teams, you're always going to have issues with privacy because there's going to be times when you have to get on the phone, you have to make a private phone call, you have to have a private conversation, you may be in HR, you might be a manager that requires privacy space. So that's one of the main challenges. A lot of other people have problems with focus work. So a lot of millennials, I'm sure you've seen them, they can put their headphones on, they can do their focus work at their desk with their computer with multiple things going on. But a lot of other people need focused, quiet time, and they need to be able to put their heads down and not have everyone around them talking. But then some of the other challenges that I think go with that is that we do want to have collaboration. So not all groups, but a lot of times sales groups and different departments want collaboration. So how do you get all of these and create a space that's also acoustically sound? Visibility and natural light, just people like to be able to see each other. You don't want to feel like you're the only one in the office, so I think people want that visibility. And natural light is always a big thing that I think more and more people, especially when you live, or work in San Diego, California, and you look out this window, who doesn't want to have that ability to have that natural light? And then finished surfaces. So these do contribute to the acoustics of a space, which a lot of you probably already know. And then obviously aesthetics. Most people want their space to look nice. I know that a lot of us want functionality, and that's the most important thing, but in the end, you do want to walk into a space that looks nice, it has good aesthetics. Oh, look at that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that hybrid work environment with the privacy and open office space. These are just a few examples of how a lot of spaces are actually have hybrids now, where they're actually private offices and there's workstations. You can see some of the different environments that those entail. Then you have other spaces that are much more open. Totally, there's no private offices whatsoever. It's all wide open environments. A lot of the solutions to this, to make that work, come down to zoning and layout. So zoning and layout is really the first thing that we would look at when we're doing design when it comes to acoustics. So it's hard to see on this, but if anyone wants this later, you can always email me. I can share this with you. But this is from an award presentation that we did on the future of office space, and it talks a little bit about zoning and how you actually zone within the office space, so that you look at it, you look at the workflow, you look at how it's zoned. When people come into the office, that tends to be more of the collaborative area, the core areas, the places where they want to walk in, talk with their coworkers about what they did over the weekend, just find places to connect and coordinate and meet. And then there's going to be more focus areas where they might sit down at their desk. And we actually look at the workspace, the open office workspace, as more of a focused area. So we don't look at that as being the collaborative area. That's the place where people should sit at their desk and do the work that they want to be doing. So whether it's at a benching style or a workstation, they would still actually be working and focused at the work that they're doing. And then surrounding that more on the outside, you might have some quiet areas, privacy rooms, which we call phone rooms. A lot of you have heard of those, the phone booths. Small meeting areas, large conference rooms. And then those collaborative areas would really be more closer to the core. So your break areas, those type of things, coffee areas, larger open meeting environments, those would be more towards the core. So if you zone these properly, along with understanding the work environment, I think that you can actually achieve something that has acoustical values so that your space is acoustically zoned properly. And then one of the things that I'll let the team over here talk a little bit more about is the acoustical installation. So installation is really important when looking at privacy rooms and areas where you're going to need acoustical privacy. We have all types of levels of installation. Some of you I don't have to tell that to you. You know this information. I won't get into the details, but we generally put insulation in the walls in privacy rooms or conference rooms. We do lay it on the ceiling, up above. But insulation, there's lots of different types of insulation, but acoustical insulation is really important when designing privacy and collaborative spaces. Finishes. So I know a lot of people want to do open office with concrete floors and open ceilings, but I think you have to really balance a space with the right finishes. So you can't have a space of all hard finishes, all glass, walls, concrete floors, open ceilings, you're definitely going to have some acoustical issues there unless you plan properly, whether it's through acoustical paneling or through some sort of sound masking. But I think it's really important to understand how the space is going to work before the final design is implemented, right? So there are acoustical engineers that can actually do, acoustical testing within a space to understand the requirements. And I'm sure that Mike or Andy will cover a little bit about the STC ratings for various areas, so they can maybe answer those questions for you. This is another open office environment where you can see it's all open office, and it's got some of the privacy rooms. So there's actually hard concrete floors. There's open ceiling environments, but you can see that there's carpet tile underneath the workstations and in the offices. So these are some of the types of things that we would do to increase the different textures in the space. You can also see on the workstations that the panels have fabric on them. They're acoustical fabric panels. So these are some of the things that can be done, in the design to, help with the acoustical absorption of the sound in the space. You can see the same approach here. And in this one, this is a very open environment, and it even comes down to the actual product that the desks are made out of, which is, basically a high-grade, like ambient high def board, which actually can absorb sound. So I think you just have to be very careful, and in this case we actually have acoustical sound panels all on the ceiling and all around the walls on the conference room. And in this one actually shows some placement of some Armstrong acoustical ceiling panels on this one, and they're part of ceiling system. We put these in a lot of open office environments now, especially over open office workstations like this, along with the panel system. But it's not just about hanging them up there. It's really understanding how the acoustics work in the space and placing them, really accordingly so that they work properly, and speccing out the right type of insulated panel. You have to realize too, here in California, that there's a lot of seismic issues with these, so they have to be very well planned out. This is not something you can just go in and throw up in the ceiling. The city does look at how those are hung, how they're going to move, the movement of them in the space for safety issues. So it's something that has to be really well planned out. I'm not sure if I was going too fast or too slow. I only had a certain amount of time. So in summary, I think it's really important to understand the workflow of the space. I didn't totally get into the details on creative office space with the company culture, but I think it's really important to understand the company culture, because not all companies want collaborative space. They don't need everybody talking to each other all the time. And as I mentioned, riding around on their scooters, or it's just, that's not who we all are. So I think it's really important to understand your company culture, your brand, make sure that you know if an open environment is really what your employees want and what they need, or maybe it's just in a portion of your environment. So it doesn't have to be something that's throughout the space. And the proper zoning. I think once you understand the workflow of a company, understand how the departments work, how the work flows through the space, and then determining, how the space is laid out, then approaching the acoustical, properties that you have to infill into the space is really important. And then just purposeful finish selections. So, it might look pretty or fancy or cool to do all concrete and open ceiling, but maybe that's not the right environment for every space that you're doing. So it's about planning, it's about having a strategy, and making sure that the acoustics are properly planned for throughout the space. So I don't know if, I think we're gonna do questions at the end, or, okay, all right, so, Andy's next, so Andy would.
All right, so my name is Andrew Vaughter. We do sound masking or white noise, and so it kind of actually leads right off of what she just finished with, which is the idea that planning is so important in a space. Too many times we end up getting introduced to a client or coming into a space, usually about 3-4 weeks after they've moved in. Everybody's gotten their desk, everybody's started working again, and all of a sudden the facility manager doesn't want to show up to work because they're getting so many complaints the second they walk in the building that they wish they had never moved. They wish they had never done all this stuff. And so planning is really, really important. So I'm going to cover a few basic things here. Why employ sound masking? What adaptable sound masking looks like for a changing workplace? How cost-effective that solution is compared to other solutions? And then also I'm going to just touch how sound masking and white noise can also integrate with green building designs. And so a lot of information there, so we're going to move quickly. The first question was, why employ sound masking? There was a 15-minute presentation done before me, which did a very good job explaining for me, but just about every office. I mean, you can go to Google, type in open office, type in modern office, and you will see a picture like this, or maybe like that. You might want to buy these images because Getty will come find you if you don't. But open office like this, collaborative space, or when we really look at how just about everybody's designing spaces, even if, let's say it's a law firm and they're building mostly closed offices. There's not a big bullpen of just 100 people on the phone out there. Even those environments end up reducing the construction techniques down to the cheapest possible way to do it, which is usually thinner walls, demountable walls. I can't tell you the last time I've gone into a new build and seen a partition between offices that went all the way up to the hard deck and was insulated and sealed properly. Those don't really happen much, and there's a lot of reasons for why those don't happen. And you guys are well aware of those reasons. And so when you're talking about privacy in a space or you're talking about overall comfort and productivity, those are kind of the two issues that sound masking is going to address. When you look at an office space like this, you've got some people who are trying to focus on their job. They're trying to get things done. What they don't want to be hearing is the conversations happening in those huddle rooms, in those conference rooms. They're trying to focus on what they're trying to get done. And vice versa. People in conference rooms and huddle rooms are trying to either have a video conference, conference call, or just a regular conference. A lot of spaces I've seen is what companies are doing is they're opening everything up on the outside. So they're putting everybody, or most everybody, out into some sort of open environment. And then they internally put a bunch of huddle rooms that are assignable. And so the AV companies love it because they get to sell all those scheduling, huddle room schedule panels. And so everybody has to essentially, if they need a private space to talk, they have to essentially go assign a room to them and go use it. I'll just take that. And so the challenge there, though, is that sometimes in some spaces you need a lot of privacy. Other times you need focus. Other times you need to be able to be doing a video conference. And so, and this is what this panel is so good for, is because sound masking is important in some of those answers. It's not the solution for every answer or every problem when it comes to acoustics. It has very specific problems that it addresses. Number one, I will tell you this. The number one thing that sound masking will address is the open office area. And it has less to do with privacy and more to do with productivity. When I'm trying to get work done and I keep getting distracted because I hear someone 20 feet away having a conversation, that's going to draw me away from my work and make it very difficult for me to focus on what I'm doing. And so what sound masking does is, instead of, the whole talk is about silence. Well, instead of making things silent, we actually introduce sound into the space. We make it louder, if you will. But what we do is we make it louder so that way you don't overhear something that's being said 20 feet away. And so pretty much every office is going to have some sort of need for that. A secondary benefit that we provide is in a closed office or conference rooms or huddle rooms that need privacy, sound masking works as well. Just ask any of the government buildings that you no doubt in San Diego have been in. They like sound masking when they really don't want people to hear what's being said in a conference room. Now they need absorption and they need other things as well, but sound masking is often implemented. So number 2 is an adaptive or a changing workplace. So when you look at this, HVAC, modern lighting, custom windows, demountable walls, huddle rooms, what do all those things have in common? Nowadays, it's that they're adaptive, that they can adjust automatically, hopefully taking things off of you guys and making it so it's not just pick up the phone and call somebody to fix this. It's automatically adapting. And so sound masking has evolved from years ago, it was a paging system, if you will, that we would pump white noise through the speakers. And if you did that, I don't know, 70% of your workforce would want to run out of the building screaming because they didn't like the sound. It gave them headaches or whatever. Because if you've listened to a radio out of tune or a TV that's got fuzzy white noise on it, you're probably not going to be too comfortable in that space. And so sound masking has really evolved in a couple ways. One, we make the sound mimic HVAC. Our goal is when someone walks into a space, they have no idea that there's a sound masking system implemented. Their brain tells them that's HVAC and they just keep on going. The other thing is control. There's really 2 ways that we've taken sound masking and given control back to the customer. And one is through zoning, where you can say this space is going to be a section all to itself and you can adjust the volumes here versus over here because the space is changing. But there's also another way to do it, and that's the little thing over there is a sensor. You can take ambient noise readings in a space. So, for instance, in a space like this, if there's 4 people because it's 6:45 in the morning and there's only a couple people that are that dedicated to their job, I'm one of them, so that's why I say that, but get there very early and get to work, they don't need sound masking at the full volume that at 2:30 in the afternoon when the place is packed and everybody's on the phone, you might need a different level of sound masking. In the past, what typically happened was whoever had a key to the room the machine was in unplugged it because that's, they were there so early they didn't want to hear it. And so automatic adaptive sound masking is really key here because we're really going into the trend of HVAC and lighting and everything else where it adapts to what's happening in the space. If you've got a large area where a lot of people are active in, we want a little more sound masking. If we have a space where there's only a couple people working, we don't need nearly as much. And so that's key. So the modern office must be ready and able to change. Everybody I talk to that sells demountable walls, that's like their sales pitch. It's easy, cheap. You can move them if you change your plan. Well, when you start moving things in a facility, that creates a whole lot of other issues with all the other facility things in a space. And so sound masking needs to be able to change as well as your space changes. Really briefly, just going to cover the ABCs of acoustic design. It fits nicely, A, B, and C, absorb, block, and cover. And we all know what absorbing sound is. We really know what blocking sound is. It's a wall or a panel. Most people don't think of that third thing, the C, the covering. We hear this all the time when someone leaves their old 30-year-old building and moves to a brand new LEED certified space. The old building had a really loud HVAC system. It had a lot of building noise to it. It probably had higher panels. Their cubicles were 6 feet. And so they had blocking, they had absorption, they had carpet and ceiling tiles. And their new space is beautiful, but it's a lot of hard surfaces, low panels so everybody can see everybody with a glass, top to it, which just reflects sound and makes it echo even more. And the HVAC system is brand new, quiet, works great, and everybody can hear everybody. And so it kind of all goes back to planning. As long as we understand that these are going to be some of the challenges, we can plan and prepare for it. And then green building design. So the nice thing about where building trends are going these days is where they always go, right? Cheaper and cheaper and cheaper as much as they can. And technology has really helped with that. So implementing a sound masking system allows you to use fewer materials in the building process. You don't have to use as much insulation or as thick of walls, or you can actually utilize some collaborative spaces instead of just have them empty because everybody wants to just go home and work instead of be in the office. An effective sound masking system is going to be low voltage. Again, referencing old systems from back in the day, a white noise system would be typically considered a high voltage, 70 volt or even 100 volt overseas. And so a lot of power consumption. You're talking about this rack with these giant amplifiers to push HVAC sound. And so that's not a very effective way to do that. So low energy consumption is key. Too many studies to count, and I don't want to waste a bunch of time showing you them, show that sound and distractions are one of the #1 factors for workplace stress, other than your boss and everything that goes along with that. But one of the natural effects that affects stress is I can't get my work done. I have these deadlines, I have all this stress being put on me, and then the building has given me stress. And so by reducing distractions, employee retention is better, stress levels are better. In fact, one of the studies referenced, they actually hooked a lot of people up to different physical monitors of stress, like heart rate and blood pressure and things like that, and saw some significant improvements. Not just sound masking, there were other things implemented, but when they were able to reduce the overall conversational distractions. So people could sit at their desk and focus on their job. They were less stressed than the people who were constantly overhearing everything happening around them. And then being adaptive is very important. Being able to turn on, off, up, down, be what's necessary in that environment to maximize all the rest of the features. And then also intelligent energy management. Being able to control this system from an energy standpoint so that it's not a burden on you or on your facility at all. When we've done our job right, you forget there's a sound masking system in your building along with all of your employees, which is the goal. You don't want to walk in, the first thing you do is plug it in, turn it on, mess with it, and then have to make a bunch of adjustments. Very similar to what people are trying to do. And I know nothing about HVAC, but really, other than I produce a sound that sounds just like it. But what they're trying to do is create an environment for you that is easy to manage, is adaptable, and reduces complaints and gets people focusing on their job instead of the temperature in the room. And so very similarly, that's what a good effective sound masking system is going to do. Of course, we're introducing sound to it instead of taking away sound, which is what the next conversation will be about. And lastly, I just want to give you an example, because a lot of people have heard of white noise. They think they know what it is, or they know how it works. But I know for a fact that most people don't know, because they ask us for cancellation. Put on the Bose headphones and cancel out sound like the airplane I'm going to be on later today. Well, that's right now, as technology stands, impossible to do in a room with 100 people in it. We could add a bunch of really disturbing canceling noise at you, and if I missed, you'd be really, really disturbed. Trust me, we've done some tests with it. So cancellation's not the answer right now. It's masking or covering. And the way we do that, I'm going to give you one example so you guys can explain this to anybody that asks. When you're flying in an airplane, people one seat behind you are having a conversation. Oftentimes it's very difficult to understand what they're saying. You can hear they're talking, but you can't understand what they're saying because the background sound of the plane has elevated and covered over that conversation that's taking place behind you. Now, we're not going to pump jet engine noise into anybody's office. That would have disastrous effects. But the concept is exactly the same. We introduce a sound to cover over the distracting noises and conversations that affect everybody in the office. That's all I've got. So.
move this up here?
Yeah, as long as
I don't want to hide the square. It's okay. So, thanks a lot. They set up a lot of the stage for why we're even here, why acoustics is a big deal, and I just want to focus on why absorption really needs to be considered. So when the name came out for this event, Sound of Silence, I like the name, but I laughed because silence is really not what we're looking for. It's about comfort. And if you've been in a place that is perfectly quiet, that's not really comfortable at all. You think something is wrong. So what we're really looking for is to balance the acoustics in the space, to correct the acoustics in the space. And so all these elements, design, sound masking, absorption, are all equally important. So I found this graphic like 48 hours ago, and I said, hey, this is really what we want to be. As facility managers, this is our goal. We want to be in the driver's seat of our facilities. We don't want the materials we use, and we don't want the natural elements in the space to dictate how we work. We want to create a space that's productive and effective. So how do we do that? We come to this luncheon and learn a little bit about the different components of acoustics. And then how do we explain that we should be investing in this? So to our business owners, we need to show this slide, and we need to say, hey, 2,000 millennials were polled nationally, and they were asked, what are the most important elements to your productivity and to your wellness, which are really the factors that drive an effective workplace. So not surprisingly, 26% of them chose the ability to control the noise level as the number one element affecting their productivity in the space. And 25% of them chose the ability to control the noise level as the number one element affecting their personal wellness. This was already reviewed, but we wanted you guys walking out of here singing the ABCs when you're done. So, for emphasis. So, it's just one piece of the pie, but it really is a whole pie. And these things can complement one another. And it's our job to really understand what role does each one have to play. So effective absorption can make sound masking even more effective because, as Andy was explaining, sound masking is introducing a sound into the space. But if there's reverberation in that space and you add sound masking to it, then you're not curing the problem at all because at that point you're just introducing more. But if you have sound panels or absorptive soft materials in the space, you're able to maximize the effectiveness that sound masking introducing sound is creating speech privacy. And soft materials and acoustic panels can also help maximize or optimize the design of a space. Because if you want a certain aesthetic, if you go to the architect and designer and say, hey, I want this hard surface, I want this angle, but you don't have any soft materials, then that's not going to be an effective place. So what is the purpose of absorption? And the main thing that absorption targets is reverberation. And reverberation is the reflection of sound waves off hard surfaces in a space. And it's important to note that sound is moving at 1,000 feet per second. And that is extremely, extremely fast. And if you don't have soft material to absorb these reflections, then it's going to feel like you're screaming with your head in a bucket. Try it, I did. And, as Tiffany was saying, with the modern designs these days, everyone does want those reflective surfaces. So acoustics is a science. It's not just saying, okay, I'm going to put soft materials on this wall and on this ceiling and it's going to be fine. There's really a science behind it. And in order to address and solve the problem, we need to understand how sound even works. So what is sound about? To summarize, I think sound is broken up into three main frequency categories. You have the low frequencies, you have the mid frequencies, and the high frequencies. And the most important thing to note is that each one of these categories has its own type of sound wave. It's like having 3 different kids, and each one is a different age. You can't feed them the same thing. You can't put them in the same grade. You can't teach them the same math problem because they're at different levels. But what you want to do is you want to find the right balance in your household to grow those kids up as best as you can. So the same thing with sound. We need to address the sound waves for the characteristics that they have. So I can't get into every single product and how it works differently, but as facility managers, when you're looking at an acoustic panel, you should be specifically looking at what sound waves is this panel targeting. Because if you look at the high frequencies, that's more of a whistle or a high-pitched sound or a violin in a concert hall. Mid-frequencies are human speech. Low frequencies are the drum, or if you're at a red light and there's a car next to you and all you hear is the bass, that's a low frequency. So if you have an open office space where you want to limit the human speech frequencies, you need to see how does that panel work in the mid frequencies. Because there are panels out there, and you've heard NRC 100 times. NRC is an average of a few of these different frequencies. So one can be very low and one can be high, and it could have the same NRC as a product that is really targeting the frequencies that you want. So just look at the product, ask for the testing, see what frequencies it's really addressing. And with that, the objective is not to eliminate sound. You know, we always say sound is part of our senses, it's natural, it's going to exist, but when we don't control the sound, then it turns into noise, and it's the noise that we really don't want. So what you're looking for in absorption is to catch all these different frequencies and balance the space so that you can really achieve comfort. An example is snow. So if you walk outside after a snowfall, which is occurring right now, as you can see, it's extremely quiet. And the reason is because the sound waves are trapped in the porous snowpack. And so when you're looking at materials, that's why, you know, soft materials work so well, because the snow is fluffy and it has a lot of air gaps, and so the sound waves can get trapped within those air gaps. But as soon as the snow freezes over, it's the slipperiest thing in the world, and if you think about it, that's how sound waves also work. So when you have extremely hard surface, it's going to reflect that sound at 1,000 feet per second in your space, and that's just the way it works. And I didn't even know any of this information 4 years ago, and most of us also didn't. But the trends these days, and there's no shame in that, because the spaces are changing. But right now, we really need to address this, and I wish I had that panel to absorb that sound happening right now. So, a method to the madness. Building on what I said, you can't just go into a space and say, all right, I'm going to put sound panels on this wall and sound panels in front of this loud person's face. I know we always have that one extremely loud person in the office. You can't just, well, maybe we can create a mask of a sound panel to cover that person and tell them it's Halloween every day. But I don't think that's going to fly. So when you're looking at a space, there are companies out there who can simulate the acoustics of a space. And so this is an example of a screenshot where you can type in the materials of all your room surfaces, you can type in the size of the room, the height of the ceiling, the purpose of the room, is it a meeting room, is it an open office, is it a cafe? And this is quantifying how much material you need, because that's really the most important thing, is making sure you have the right amount of material. So you don't want it to be a guessing game, because you're not working with free money, and we really need to be responsible on how we spend things. And when you're looking at a product and you're looking to work with a company, make sure that they can tell you how much product you need, so that you can go to the business owner and say, hey, we did our research, this is how much product we need, we know it'll work, and that makes everyone's life easier. The process moves faster, it looks like we've done our homework as facility managers, and everyone's happy because we did the pre-work to make sure that it does work. And as important as the right quantity of material, it's the right placement of the material as well. So many companies will say, okay, you need for this room 100 square feet of absorptive material. And then look for their guidance and look for their methods and look for their recommendations on, all right, how am I supposed to apply this material? So just another reminder. In an open office space that's benching, the most effective absorption would be desk panels. So high NRC, and not really the fabric wrapped panels that you traditionally see, because they're very thin and they're really not effectively absorbing those human speech mid-frequencies that you need. You need to look for a desk panel that has a 0.8 or a 0.9 NRC. And I know it's not easy to find, but if you're spending that money, it better be spent on something that is really going to work, or it's just going to disappoint people otherwise. In a conference room, walls and ceilings are important, because if you have multiple surfaces, you're creating the most balanced environment for the reflections to be absorbed. And lastly, when you're looking at a product, you should make sure that the product is legitimate, its test results are legitimate. So third-party certification, in my opinion, is extremely, extremely important. Right now, this is clearly a trend. And with all trends, people chase the dollars. And there will be many companies that come and say, we have a sound panel, we have a sound panel, we have a sound panel. Okay, show us your testing. What have you done? Do you have any awards? Can we see the results? Is it third-party certified? It's unbelievable how many meetings we go to that an architect has specified a product, and then we get called in, and they say, hey, we need another product. I said, well, what happened with the first product? Well, it was a sound panel, but maybe they didn't check all the tests, and it didn't really solve that problem. So I want to save everyone time, so look at these. And the two tests you should be looking for are ASTM C423 and ISO 354. They're two different organizations, but it's the same test. So that's really what you should be looking for. Before you look at acoustic panel, you should ask for these test results. You should ask for an explanation, because anyone can show numbers. And companies these days are actually trying to confuse people on their test numbers. So they'll publish something, and you read it, and you say, what unit is this? And you don't really know how to read it. You'll see 80%, but 80% of what? So ask the person to really walk you through, what does this mean practically? And in California, these are 3 facilities that are often doing testing: Riverbank, Western Electro, and then some universities, of course. So look for that stamp. That way we know we're all safe. And I have to try and cut it a little short, but if you have any other questions, my team is local here. Our headquarters is based in Southern California, and we have a team in San Diego as well. So if you have any other questions, then you can hang out. We also have some brochures in the back, and you can take a look and ask any questions you have specifically. Thanks.